Every afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, 82-year-old Mr. Henry made his slow way to the same wooden bench near the pond. The walk took longer these days, his knees ached, and his breath came in short bursts, but he never missed a day. The bench, weathered by years of sun and rain, had become his quiet companion. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant chimney smoke, but no one ever seemed to notice the man sitting quietly amid the golden rustle. Henry wore the same brown overcoat each day, frayed at the cuffs and a bit too thin for the cooling weather. It once belonged to someone he loved, a small reminder of a time when he was not alone. His fingers trembled slightly as he folded them over the cane resting on his lap. His eyes, though dim, scanned the faces of joggers, children, dog walkers, each rushing past, too busy to stop, too distracted to see. He hadn't always been invisible. Years ago, he'd been Mr. Henry, the high school English teacher. His classroom had been filled with laughter, debate, and poetry. He had once inspired dreams, lit young minds with hope. But retirement came, and then loss, and then silence. Now, he was simply that old man on the bench. Still, he came, not to be noticed, but because he believed, perhaps foolishly, that someday, someone might stop. Someone might remember that every quiet soul carries a story, a lesson, a life, and until then, he'd sit, waiting, with grace and quiet hope, among the falling leaves. The wind had a sharp edge that afternoon, cutting through jackets and nudging leaves into little swirling dances. Evan had just wrapped up a tough job interview across town. His tie was slightly crooked, and his shoes were dusted with gravel. He stopped at the park to catch his breath and sip a hot coffee, trying to shake off the anxiety of a long, uncertain day. As he sat on a bench opposite the pond, his eyes wandered, and landed on an old man across the path. The man was sitting alone, hunched slightly, his overcoat doing little against the cold. His hands trembled as he rubbed them together, and though his face looked calm, there was a kind of quiet weight behind his eyes. Evan hesitated. People didn't just walk up to strangers anymore, not in this world, not in this time. But something about the old man tugged at him. Maybe it was the way he looked, like he was waiting for someone, who never came. Evan stood, walked to the nearest cafe cart, and bought a second coffee. Then, gathering his courage, he crossed the path and stopped in front of the man. "Excuse me, sir," he said, offering the cup. "It's cold. Would you mind if I sat here?" The old man looked up, startled, as if pulled from a faraway place. For a moment, he said nothing. Then a faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "Please," he said softly, patting the empty space beside him. And just like that, a silent bench became the start of something neither of them could have expected. What began as a quiet gesture turned into a daily ritual. Each afternoon, Evan returned to the same park bench, 2 coffees in hand. Henry would already be there, his hands folded neatly on his cane, a soft smile forming the moment he saw Evan approaching. They talked, at first, cautiously, like strangers peeling back layers of time. But soon, the conversations flowed as easily as the breeze that rustled the autumn leaves around them. Henry spoke of his classroom, where Shakespeare once echoed off the walls and students dared to dream. He told stories of a boy named Marcus who overcame a stutter to become a lawyer, and a girl named Lila who once wrote a poem so beautiful it made Henry weep. Evan listened, wide-eyed, amazed at the life behind the worn coat and trembling hands. And then one day, Henry spoke of her, Clara, his wife of 47 years. How they met at a library. How she used to hum while making tea. How cancer took her one slow, cruel winter. He said it softly, as if afraid to disturb the memory. Evan didn't speak. He didn't have to. He just placed a hand on Henry's shoulder. Sometimes they laughed, over old classroom pranks or Henry's terrible attempt at texting. Other times, they sat in silence, watching the world pass, content in shared presence. One afternoon, as Henry finished reciting a line from Whitman, Evan said quietly, "You've lived so much. You taught all your life, and you're still teaching me." Henry looked at him, eyes glassy but warm. In that moment, Evan wasn't just a stranger with coffee, he was a student of life, and Henry, the teacher he never knew he needed. It was a Friday. The air held a hint of winter, and Henry sat on the bench, bundled up, his scarf tucked neatly under his chin. He waited, as he always did, for Evan. But this time, something was different. Instead of arriving alone, Evan came with a group trailing behind him, men and women of all ages. Some carried flowers, others held books, a few had tears in their eyes before they even reached the bench. Henry blinked, confused. What's all this? Evan smiled and knelt beside him. They're your students. I found them. One by one, they stepped forward. I'm Marcus, said a tall man in a suit. You helped me find my voice when no one else could. I'm Lila, said a woman holding a framed poem. You told me I could write. I never stopped. More followed. Nurses, teachers, parents, each with a story, a moment, a thank you. Henry's lips trembled. His cane dropped to the ground as his hands covered his face. The emotion overwhelmed him. I thought I was forgotten, he whispered. Never, Lila said, taking his hand. You changed our lives. The park grew still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Evan stood back, watching as Henry was surrounded, not by pity, but by legacy. The man once invisible was now being seen, honored, remembered. A single tear rolled down Henry's cheek. Not from sadness, but from a quiet kind of joy. The kind that comes when a life lived in service is finally reflected back with love. What Evan did wasn't grand or loud. It was simple. He remembered someone who felt forgotten, and that changed everything. Winter eventually came, blanketing the town in quiet snow. One day, Henry didn't show up at the bench. Then another day passed, and another. Evan still came, holding 2 coffees, hoping, just maybe, that Henry would appear with that gentle smile and well-worn scarf. But the bench remained empty. Weeks later, a small obituary appeared in the local paper. Henry Langford, beloved teacher, devoted husband, and quiet friend, passed peacefully in his sleep. No immediate family, few known survivors, but the town knew better now. Henry had left behind something far greater than relatives. He left behind stories, lessons, hearts he'd touched, and lives he had quietly shaped. With the help of those former students, Evan petitioned the city. And by spring, when the trees had bloomed again and birds returned to sing, something new appeared beside that weathered bench. A bronze plaque, simple, elegant, and permanent. It read, "In memory of Mr. Henry Langford, who taught with love, listened with heart, and was never truly alone." Evan sat beside it often, smiling softly, sipping his coffee. Children played nearby, teenagers laughed on skateboards. Life went on, but now, it paused for a moment whenever someone read that sign. Sometimes, a passerby would sit beside Evan and ask, who was he? And Evan would say, he was a teacher. The best kind. He didn't just teach in a classroom. He taught by being human, by being kind. The bench was no longer just a piece of wood in a park. It was a monument to quiet impact. To forgotten people who mattered more than they knew. To the truth that no life lived in kindness is ever truly forgotten. And every time someone stopped to read, Henry was remembered, again.